All right. First of all, I hope you all had a chance to grab a cocktail. You might need one or two to stomach what I'm about to say. A little applause, right? And I hope you're really enjoying yourself. So look, welcome. We're no longer in stealth mode. We're out. We're the real deal. Yeah. I mean, we're a real business now. I mean, we're making product. We're selling it to customers. The feedback we're getting from the customers is absolutely outstanding. In many ways, it feels like we're hitting on, I wouldn't say all cylinders, but damn near all cylinders. We're doing a really, really great job.
6 or 8.
Our products, you know, you're standing on our feedstock. You're walking on the only ingredient we put into our system, which are almond shells. And in those almond shells is all kind of biochemical value that almost no one ever contemplates. Our process valorizes and accesses all of that biochemical value through a very simple and ancient process called pyrolysis. And we convert these almond shells into multiple high-value derivatives that help farmers intensify their operations. By that I mean make more revenue and do that sustainably. It's a pretty novel concept to do something that helps your business and at the same time does really good things in the world. So how do our products actually work? Let me tell you about lettuce, because everybody knows about lettuce. We did trials about a year ago on head lettuce, the same kind of stuff you put on your sandwiches. Now that's about a $10,000 an acre crop, revenue, top line. $10,000, and by the time the farmer takes that to market and subtracts all of their expenses, in a good year they net $700 to $800. That's University of California data, not my data. So that's a 7 to 8% return on sales. Well, we gave them 10% increase in marketable yield. That's $1,000. 10% on 10,000 is $1,000. But then we cut their fertilizer loads in half and cut out about $200 of their input expenses. We would drive $1,200 to the bottom line on an otherwise $700 to $800 bottom line crop, and doing that all sustainably. That's 170% increase potential in net profit. If any vendors are here and they can come show me how to get 170% improvement in net income, we're going to do business together, I promise you. And the beauty about our business is that we do that, and at the same time, we're displacing synthetic chemicals. We believe that there's a fundamental shift in agriculture away from chemical-intensive processes that are really about killing insects or killing pathogens, basically kill everything except for the crop you want to take to market. And we think there's a fundamental shift to biology and life and balance. And the key for us is to be able to do that at really massive scale, because otherwise we're talking about gardening. And gardening, while it might be fun for some of you, doesn't really change the world. If we really want to change the world, we got to think about how do we change the way industrial agriculture operates without putting unnecessary constraints on industrial agriculture. Our value proposition is we will help you increase your bottom line, we will help you reduce your input costs, and no matter what, you're going to do good things for the environment. So what do we actually make with these almond shells? There was a walking tour inside that you went through, and if you didn't understand, maybe I'll fill in the blanks. We heat that stuff up at 475 degrees, and we produce a chemical cocktail called Corifol. If you like, there are bottles of product up here for anybody who wants to take it. It's already pre-diluted. You put it on your plants at home or whatever you want. Inside there is basically the plant's defense mechanisms. What happens when plants are under stress? Any agronomists here already know this. The plants curl, they change color, they move their metabolic profile, as they say, from growing and thriving, which is primary metabolism, to survival, which is secondary metabolism. And in that process, they produce the same kind of chemicals that are produced in here. But instead of doing it with enzymes, we do it with heat. And then we collect all of that stuff into a cocktail, and we basically reapply the plant's immune system to all kinds of crops. And we're in almonds and walnuts and pistachios and lettuce and tomatoes and strawberries and leafy greens. We're in a lot of different crops, including even citrus. And the results are, and this is the great surprise I've had in this process, are way better than I ever thought they would be. I kind of figured, look, we got a do-gooder business, you know. It's a coin flip, might work here, might not work there. The feedback I get from people who are selling our product and talking to growers on the ground is unbelievably positive. And then you can see it in this image, which was taken by me, but with Penny Newman's Scott Powell. That's Corifol, $60 an acre on an orchard, and this is key, that was designed to be ripped up and replaced. And if you look, you can't really see it on the other side, the other half of the orchard has already been ripped out. We're resurrecting oranges in this orchard, orange trees in this orchard, and deferring all of that capital expense for that farmer. That's amazing. Amazing also because trees are slower growing kind of plants compared to grass or whatever, and we're resurrecting those groves. That is incredible what we're doing. The second thing we do, of course, is we produce this biochar. Well, biochar is really interesting because this is most of the carbon that is actually in the plant matter. When you think about our products, all of the carbon in our products was in the air just a few months ago, and most of it is never going back. Why? Because you can't digest this stuff, and neither can microbes, which means that that carbon cannot be turned back into CO2, which you're breathing out right now. You're breathing out your lunch, and microbes will then digest into methane, and all of that goes back into the atmosphere. So it's a dead end in the carbon cycle. We remove carbon from the atmosphere and put it in soils where we transform the fertility of soils, because microbes thrive in this stuff, and it retains nutrients, and it holds a hell of a lot of water. About 5 times its weight, about 80% of its volume. That was a little experiment that's back there. You can do this on yourself and have some fun with it. But when you think about what does a ton of carbon dioxide look like, you can't smell it, you can't see it, you can feel it in the wind, I suppose, but 1 ton of carbon dioxide is 1/3 of a ton of biochar. Those 6 sacks that are sitting out there is 1 ton of biochar. That is 2.87 tons precisely of carbon into a form that you can hold and you can manipulate, and it's credible. You can hold it like a sack of flour. And therefore, we have a lot of credibility in the emerging carbon offset markets, which is a whole source of revenue for us. So we are the ultimate triple bottom line company from an environmental, social, and governance standpoint, making really, really great profits, doing really great things for the local communities by creating high-paying jobs here in Merced and everywhere else in the world, permanently removing carbon from the atmosphere, all by helping our farmers, whether or not they're conventional or organic growers, make more money. And that's really, really exciting. And so now I get to stand up here and you know, tell you what a great job we're doing. But I'll tell you, it's been really, really tough. Been really hard for a long time. I mean, I've gone from Boston to Beijing to Berlin and pitched investors all over the world, and most of them said no. The right guys said yes. Guys like Nico and Charlie and Don Kendall, and who else is here? Don Kendall, John Garamendi, Jim Betcher, one of my founding investors. Yes, Dan Root and Arnie, wonderful. Couldn't even see you there. The right people said yes. And you know, being a startup CEO or a CEO in general can be pretty lonely. You know, sometimes you know you're high-fiving your team. The next day you're like, curling up into a fucking fetal position under the table because you don't know what's going on. You know, Murphy's Law is I'm not even going to use the F word twice, but you know what he's going to show up. It's brutal, and you can feel all alone. But when I look at everybody here, I realize I'm not alone. Investors include my wife and I, who have also put a lot of money into the company. It includes our partners, like the team at Penny Newman, especially Matt Nicoletti and Doug Bruner and the whole crew at the Ag Center, who buy product, make connections for me that would be really, really hard to make otherwise, if not impossible. And finally, I want to thank Christian Roy. Christian is maybe the only entrepreneur I know that is more stubborn than me. Because he's been at this pyrolysis thing for a long, long time, being a professor of chemical engineering at Laval University and really a guru in the world of pyrolysis. And so I do want to thank our partners at Pyrovac for the companionship, the partnership, and making this all happen. So we're in all together. And so I look out at this and I realize, you know what, it's not lonely. It's hard, but it's not lonely. And I want to thank everybody here for having our back, supporting us, coming out, and that's all I'm going to say. Otherwise, have a great time.
Thanks, Mike. At this time, I want to invite our speakers to join us up on the panel here. We're going to have a brief conversation really around pivot points. We see, kind of Corigin and this opportunity as representing a pivot within a couple of industries, within the ag industry and in carbon. And wanted to take this advantage to bring together this community that Mike has assembled for a conversation about pivot points within the industry and give us all a little bit of perspective on some of the key triggers that are happening in the industry right now and how that all kind of circles back up to us. So the way this is going to work, this will be quick, about 3 minutes for each speaker, 180 seconds. It's a 180-degree pivot point. That's a cute little thing to know for you math fans in the audience. Each of them are going to talk a little bit about journeys in their own careers and experience that can help give this all a little bit of context. And then after we do that, we're going to have a little conversation about how everyone sort of collectively sees this transformation happening in the ag space in delivering on crop yields while answering ESG demands from the public. And then we'll do a little bit of Q&A for everybody. So welcome you to hang around for that, and then there'll be more food and drink for you afterwards. So I'm going to start off and introduce Serge. Serge Boone, one of the smartest indoor ag growers in the U.S., third-generation greenhouse expert, who came from Pioneer Hybrid International and built one of the most successful indoor grows at the Brush Creek Ranch. I think I have here a 20,000 square foot operation, 100,000 pounds of produce a year grown indoors. And also an early adopter of Corigin products, so you've had firsthand experience actually deploying this and seeing how it works. So really delighted that you've come here to join us today and welcome you to share a few words about yourself and your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for my 180-degree pivot point, I was a DuPont pioneer, had a very successful career, was there for 6 years, and then they put a promotion offer in front of me to run a large team and business unit in Hawaii. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking of actually what I want to do is grow local, organic, sustainable produce. I want to go back to my roots and grow stuff. So a couple days later, I declined the offer. I put my resignation in, packed my bags, and drove to Wyoming in the middle of nowhere. What could go wrong, right? So being there and being like super excited, I can now like build a greenhouse program in the middle of nowhere to produce local produce for a luxury ranch, but also have like an impact in the local community that it's hard to get produce in the middle of nowhere. So we have a contact there. So it all sounds easy, right? I get the greenhouse up and running, I get the systems in, and oh boy, the yields were decent, but not great. Organic growing is absolutely the hardest thing I ever did. I'm a commercial grower from background, but the science nerd that I am, I designed like a bunch of experiments, and I got to work. And in that time also, I met Mike at a conference, and he tells me about Corigin. And you know, it was quite the conversation, and it just sounded too good to be true, right? It can't do yield and pest management and a better flavor. It's like it's impossible. But I'm willing to try it. So we went to work and we added a product. And it was really the turning point for me that I knew with, of course, like with a lot of like additional practices management, that it was actually possible to get organic growth in a greenhouse and hydroponically to yields that are close to commercial. So that was really like the turning point when I got the Corigin and incorporated it really into our program and doing that really systematically managed, that we got to the commercial yields, we got to the flavor and to great success for that ranch.
That's all the days. That's good. Thank you. You can put that right back there. Thanks. Thanks, Serge. And next up, Doug Bruner, and I think most folks know you, Doug, as dairyman and head of the Ag Center. Oh no, you're up next. This is a calculated move. This is a very calculated move. Founder of the Ag Center, of course. And and I think just really understanding competitive advantages that you can have by making the right connections here within the valley, and particularly the opportunity for regenerative solutions for future farmers. So welcome, Doug, and welcome your thoughts.
All right, well, yeah, Doug Bruner, thank you guys for inviting me. Again, I've met Mike probably 3 years ago. Brad Samuelson sitting right there introduced us. It was kind of the founding, when we began the Ag Center or conceptualized it, and Mike had an interesting product. At that time, I don't know if it was up my alley. I have a ADD, so I can't focus too long, so I probably got up and left. However, Mike was a very intelligent person who I did not forget. They asked me pivot points in my life. Today was a great one that kind of reminded me of that. Mike was having his meeting. They asked me for water. I stepped in shit. This time it was dog shit. However, since I was about 5 years old, my boots were in shit till I was about 28 years old, literally being on a dairy. That being said, I had a lot of dreams. I had a lot of ideas. You get pretty lonely out there. You're kind of isolated. It's like an island. And you dream of what it's like off the island. And I had a lot of those. So when I got off the island farming tomatoes, we got lucky, and we made strategical moves as our farming company, started planting almonds, things like that. Started, being a dairyman, you're used to working year round. So in that focus, we started building other companies along the way. And I look at my pivot, when somebody says pivot points, I'm not too smart, so I called Matt Nicoletti last night because he always translates everything for me. And, I started thinking about what changed me, and what has changed me in my career, and any investment I make, whether it's Corigin or whether it's a company I will invest in now, today, or in the future, it's the people. And I can look around here with a lot of people who work with me on a day-to-day basis. I'm very fortunate to have these people. These people are the company. You know, the founder eventually does not become the company. It's who he surrounds himself with. And my heart is very soft to everybody who makes everything for me or makes the companies that I'm involved with successful. So I've been fortunate through meeting people like Mike. Matt is up here too, where we get to enjoy in the funds, the hardship. It's always hard at the beginning, and that's what makes it the best, is because when you look back, you get to think about everything that you've accomplished. So in Mike's endeavor, I know how hard he's worked. I know where Corigin started. I know where it's at today. And I believe in the people here, especially the leader. And as long as people believe in the process, believe and hold on to that and stay focused on that, I believe it will be successful. And that's what I preach in anything I do. That's what I preach in the Ag Center, and that's what I preach to everybody I'm involved with. And yes, we're young, but we're very aggressive, and we want to taste in any share. So we are moving forward in this regenerative platform. This is what I believe the future is. If you read enough or look enough on the internet, you see this is the future, and sustainability and new things for environmental sustainability is the future. So I know I'm definitely the most educated up here, but I'm smart enough to know when something's a good thing. So I thank you again for inviting me up here, and I'll pass it on to whoever I need to pass it on to.
Thanks, Doug. Doug, you referenced Matt, so I want to welcome Matt to share a few words too. I mean, Matt, as we spoke earlier today, a representative millennial on the panel, but also hugely influential in your work too, in kind of helping to guide Penny Newman and looking at the road forward. And certainly a great part of that comes into maximizing the value that can be had for producers and easing pressure on the soil. And that, you know, kind of leads me to the farm products division that now you have that's really focused on regenerative solutions, which seems in a way kind of a great step forward for a company like Penny Newman itself. So welcome, happy to have you here, and welcome you to share some thoughts on your own pivot in your life.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Matt Nicoletti. My family is the majority stakeholder at Penny Newman Grain Company. My father is our president and CEO. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a large commodity trading and supply chain logistics firm. Our primary market is selling feed to the dairy industry here in California, importing that in large scale from out of state in the interior US, Canada, or even overseas. But our market has been midstream, very industrial, commercial scale agriculture. And for me, I started my career unsure if I was actually going to end up back at Penny Newman. After I graduated from college, I majored in business with an emphasis on entrepreneurship. Started my career in Silicon Valley. And you can imagine there's a pretty cultural divide between the folks out there where I started my career and where I came back to several years after, when my dad got sentimental and said, "Hey, you want to try this? Time to get back here." So it was a little earlier than I thought I would leave the city, but I'm incredibly grateful that I did. I'm incredibly grateful for the experience and the perspective that it gave me, particularly with respect to innovation and disruption. And immediately the first thing I realized when I got back to work with him was how dynamic the agriculture industry always has been, in terms of where we're producing crop, how we're producing crop, extremely volatile markets, weather events. I mean, farmers and all handlers of food have to be dynamic people in order to survive and make a living. So that was a crazy realization right out of the gate. And it was an amazing learning experience, getting such an incredible lens into the supply chain that makes the standard of living that we all in the developed world get to enjoy, and not think about how difficult it is to produce food. And I developed a sort of defensive-ness of that system, of that supply chain, this incredibly resilient food system that allows us here in the developed world to spend less of our disposable income on food than we ever have in any other time in history. And so whenever I would hear narratives from my peers that were in the tech space, the folks that I started my career with, or my friends from college, I would have a natural defensiveness. I would immediately start to kind of discredit cognitive biases, confirmation bias, any sort of critique in the way that we produce food, because these people are removed from it. They don't realize how hard it is. And another incredible realization, and I would say my biggest pivot point, came by way of a gentleman, an unrefined agronomic genius, as I take to refer to him, who's just turned bright red, walked into our office. This very, I don't even know how to describe, is eccentric the right word, but brilliant, unrefined man from Utah showed up with an idea for a soil amendment. And for us, we weren't selling a lot of crop inputs at that point in time, so it was diversification. We gave him a platform, brought his product to market, introduced him to our customers. We didn't give him very many resources, so he was pretty much doing everything, making the product, getting it out there, selling it, delivering it. And it was just positive feedback after positive feedback, all anecdotal, And so the principals at Penny Newman just started to go, this guy seems he's pretty cool, And then we learned about his philosophy and his ethos with respect to the agronomic approach he takes. And it was all about soil health, right? And fixing the degraded soils that are uniquely degraded here in California due to conventional practices, high salt fertilizers and inputs, things that are paradoxically, the products that we're applying to our soil are compromising the very thing in the soil that makes those products effective and available to the plant. So he came to us with a product to fix that. And it immediately opened my eyes to the fact that, we do have an amazingly efficient food system, but it's not perfect, right? And there are aspects of traditional farming, an element of having to look backwards in order to look forward, but it lent a lot of credibility to this regenerative ag movement, the critiques that I was naturally defensive of, generally speaking, coming from the coastal elites. And it really motivated me to put my heart and soul into this particular division of our business, because I realized that the timing couldn't have been better. The market is finally ready for this. Farmers are listening. Farmers are fighting struggles they've never faced before with water issues out here in California, ground being salted out, and conventional agriculture follows a law of diminishing returns. It does. The more you follow those intensive practices, the less healthy and resilient and productive your soil becomes. And so there's a meeting in the middle here. And our mission is to make regenerative farming approachable. Not make it exclusive, a utopian farm where you've got livestock grazing in your orchard and highly diversified crops rotating every year. But, why not reward farmers for making incremental progress toward that more utopian vision of what a sustainable and regenerative farm can be? That, to me, is a mission I could get behind, and it was at the heart of my pivot point. So.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate that. Mike, we've already heard a little bit from Mike, but Mike has his own sort of pivot point to share. I mean, some of you may not know that Mike was a senior executive at one of the world's largest scientific instrumentation companies before coming to start Corigin. That's in itself a pivot. But really coming to understand, as Matt was describing to us, that the intrinsic value in food systems and natural systems, if we learn to optimize them and use them appropriately, whether that's in biochemistry or through biochar, or just creating a circular economy for farmers. So, Mike, I welcome you to say a few words.
Yeah, so it's probably October 2014. I'd been 7 years into completely turning around maybe one of the sickest venture capital backed companies in Silicon Valley, where we made the world's highest precision devices for measuring greenhouse gases everywhere in the world. And we changed the way the world's scientists know what's happening in what we call the global carbon, water, nitrogen cycles, sort of these atomic transmissions, if you will, that are the foundation of life, that comprise every atom in our body and in the soil and the plants and in the air and in the sea and all of that. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, which is really around trying to get at a solution to a problem, because just like an MRI can show you where you have a tumor, let's say, can't do anything about the tumor. To really address the problem with environmental consequences and climate change, you have to figure out a way to get around and identify carbon atoms and move them from one location to another. And I thought the best approach might be an artificial intelligence system to monitor that. And then I had breakfast with Jim Betcher, who led the last round of equity on a $100 million pre-money valuation of my previous company. He told me about biochar. And I said, you gotta be kidding me, biochar? Soil amendments? Jim, I'm an entrepreneur in qualitative, quantitative chemistry, remote sensing, managed service contracts, etc. And he said, I think you really need to read up on this. And basically got pregnant with the idea. And my pivot point really is moving out of the world of scientific instruments, but using all of that experience to get into regenerative agriculture, all based on the simple premise of, can you remove carbon atoms out of the air and put them somewhere else where it provides extraordinary collinear value? And the name Corigin is a contraction of carbon origin. And if we can force that function from displacing fossil fuels, carbon that come from thousands of feet below the surface of the earth, to carbon that comes from thousands of feet above the surface of the earth, and valorize that and make money on that, then we change the world. That's my pivot point.
Thanks. And now it's time for Charlie, and if anyone is familiar with seeing triple wash spinach packaged in the market or Earthbound Farms, certainly knows Charlie's work. I think over 10 years or so, Charlie, was it, from you CFO and CEO, and you led that company to really hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales, and really growing into the largest organic produce operation in the world. And I think in thereby really proving how organics truly can scale to the industrial level, and also doing that through some hardships too, like the 2006 E. coli breakout, which you helped to lead Earthbound's response to that, and really help that company emerge stronger than ever. And I think now, in transitioning yourself from leading that company to now being an investor and looking for opportunities to continue to create impact, and leveraging all that experience has given you a really unique perspective on the industry, and also in the role of companies like Corigin that stand to create turning points of their own. So welcome, great to have you here, and welcome any thoughts you have.
Thanks. So I think they saved the oldest for last, because I'm the oldest one up here by far, and been around this space for a long time. I was telling Matt, I like the term regenerative agriculture. We call it organic farming back in my day in 1998. We didn't have internet back then. Google did not exist. You couldn't research it. So we went on a gut feel. And I will tell you, there's not one pivot point, but I'd say there's probably 3 or 4 points in my career at Earthbound, which was actually 16 years, a long time in the agricultural side. And for all of those that produce food that are here and in the agriculture community, thank you. It's hard work. So just thank you. It's really hard to do. So one of the things I would tell you is the first time I got introduced to organic, I did not know what it was. I met the founders of Earthbound at a health resort. And when I asked, why would you do organics, when I talked to one of the farmers when I was doing my diligence, he's like, I don't want to go home and hug my children with the chemicals in conventional farming on my clothes. And I went, wow. The second piece that I would tell you is that as I was beginning to talk to other people in the seafood industry, what we realized is we were creating dead zones with petrochemical runoffs in our water systems. And we were creating water quality issues around our country with petrochemicals. And so, again, another data point that showed that we need to change some of our agricultural techniques that we need to apply to produce food in an ecosystem that can sustain itself. Otherwise, to Matt's point, we continue to strip the minerals from what Mother Earth does, and it continues to cause you to put more petrochemicals on to try to keep up. It's an ever-ending cycle. What we found in the days at Earthbound is after about 7 years, the soil actually has enough microbes in it to actually create yield greater than the conventional farming. Now, we never told anybody that because we never wanted competition. When I was in organics, we kept it very quiet. But there's a tipping point that occurs. And I think the last piece of data point I would tell you, I was in Shanghai, probably in kind of 2012. And the new regime in China had invited me over, and they offered Earthbound 16,000 acres free to grow organic food in China. After we sent our ag team over, we concluded the soil quality is not acceptable, the air quality is not acceptable, the water quality is not acceptable. China offered to replace it all to have organic food. They were that concerned about their food security and their production system. The requirement was half of the production had to go to the government, half got to be sold into the local marketplace. We declined and we left. However, while I was there, it had the worst record in history of pollution in Shanghai. In my hotel room, I could not see out my window for this pollution. It was that bad. So what we recognize is we have to find ways to remove some of the carbon impacts in our world while we produce more and more food at a price point that people can afford and that farmers can make money doing it. It's not an easy task. It's really hard. When I met Mike and Jim in Palo Alto in 2016, they shared with me their biochar in a little tube, and I said, yeah, I used that in 1998 on an R&D farm we had in Carmel Valley, California. Works great. Nobody could scale it. I met Christian with Mike. I looked at his systems and I went, this is interesting. This might be a game changer to what we know works, and if we can take it to scale, where farmers can lower their cost, improve their yield, improve their margin, we might make it sustainable farming. I like the term regenerative. I like the young group up here with the new terminology. We've been at this for a long time in our world. But I really like what the next generations are trying to look at to preserve what's going on in our globe and our ecosystem while we try to feed the globe. It's not an easy task, but I actually think the systems that Corigin has gives us a shot to try to scale this to make it work on a large-scale production system. So that would be my only comments.
That's great. Thanks so much. Well, I'm going to wrap around a little bit. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask the panel or just curiosity, but I'm happy to pass the mic around and take advantage of the opportunity. And maybe as we do, I could start off with a question, and it stems from something that Matt and I were talking about earlier, which is a lot of farmers are reluctant to make big changes, and if they do scale up, like Charlie, you were just saying about using biochar at a very small plot of land as an R&D project, but when it comes to trying to scale up solutions like this, farmers tend to tread cautiously. I mean, you have to be very risk adverse. You do not want to get into trouble in that way. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts about scaling these kinds of solutions for rapid adoption. Is that even possible, or is there just kind of this is a long tail type of approach of proving out slowly and slowly over time? Is there like a tipping point or something that can help build more acceleration in terms of adopting solutions like this?
So
rapid adoption is a relative term, right? And you have to tip your hat, as I mentioned before, to the dynamism that farmers and anybody in the ag and food industry have always had to face, right? And it's that dynamism that is also really reflective of risk. So if you come in and you tell a farmer that they need to improve their soil health, right? There's this regenerative ag movement. If you cover crop, if you use compost, if you use no-till, if you integrate livestock, these are all traditional practices that we now understand why they were effective, right? And why they preserved our soil health. So essentially we have the vast majority of our food in a commercial, conventional production system. And those farmers are going to be, as mentioned, very reluctant to change, and due to the risks that they're constantly facing, when you introduce something new to them, they're going to deploy it in a controlled manner and at a controlled scale. So they know that they're not risking their crop, their livelihood, right? That said, if you can generate an ROI in year one, it's incredibly compelling. And generally speaking, it is a multi-year sales cycle. You get in there on year one, 10, 20, maybe 40 acres if you're lucky. Year two, a couple of hundred. Year three, you're on the 1,200 acre citrus ranch for that grower to whom you introduced that product or solution. So the the growth curve tends to be exponential, right? And like any good, new, valuable product, the word of mouth and the buzz that's generated once you have that scaled up adoption, that growth rate continues to accelerate. So I think the key to this, and the thing that made Corigin and Corifol and Corigen's products so appealing to us, is the immediate results you see, and the fact that we're not asking growers to spend any more money to increase their cost of production. In fact, we're facilitating a decreased cost in production and an increase in quality and yield, as Mike alluded to. So I think it's critical to making it approachable and to scaling it as rapidly as the market will bear by making it something that generates an ROI in year one.
Yeah, I would just add to this. Picaro was my previous company, and I remember doing an installation at Environment Canada for one of the first instruments that was sold when I was CEO of my previous company. And I asked Doug Worthy, was his name, Chief Greenhouse Gas Researcher for the government of Canada, where he got his science, where he learned about new technology, and he gave me some flippant answer. And so I kept at him again. I said, what conference do you go to? What do you read? And I said, well, he said, why do you want to know? And I said, Doug, because if this works, I want to tell more customers, more atmospheric physicists. He goes, you don't have to worry about that. And I'm thinking, no, that's everything I need to worry about. And he sets me down and he says, look, we're in Toronto. In 3 days, the air is going to be over Germany. And 3 more days after that, it's going to be over China. Everybody knows what everybody does in this particular space. If your device works, you're not going to have to worry about selling it. And that should scare the hell out of anybody, because you cannot hide. And I think that's one of the interesting things about agriculture. You can't hide from these results. Farmers drive down everybody else's roads. They look at whatever is going on. And if you can generate these kind of results, thanks to the cocktails the Penny Newman guys are doing, this sells itself pretty well. And it's the best way to be in business, ultimate transparency. I mean, even Dennis, right? You were talking about Dennis Butcher. Look, how did I get Dennis on board? I gave him some product. I said, go try it. No matter what I do, that's exactly what they're going to do when they leave. The next call was very positive. It's the same thing I did with Surge. Gave him the too good to be good true juice, and the next email I got from him is, holy cow, this stuff works really well. We're not using neem anymore. And if you have products that can work with maximum transparency, that is the easiest way to market and scale.
That's great. Charlie, Doug, any thoughts on estimating?
Yeah, so we had 50,000 acres of organic production when I exited Earthbound. We started at 100 acres. And we had 50,000 during that 16-year period. To go to a systemic program, you have to have scale. it's too hard for large-scale organizations to do it piecemeal. So the one thing I would say today, this is a great event, and Mike, thanks for putting this on, and everybody that's helped Mike put all this together, thank you. What I will tell you is I'm going to say this, Christian, in less than 24 months, I'm not going to say what month, but less than 24, come back and see the size and scale of the operations it will have. And then you'll be able to look at large-scale applications in a way that I think will start to be game-changing. For big companies, and I know many of them from my years in this industry, to really go big, we have to prove out the efficacy, which we're doing now, and then we have to be able to deliver at scale so that they can make an easy switch. Farmers don't like to change. My farmers at Earthbound, on all of our acreage, they didn't like to change, but they would sit and listen. And if you could prove it out, and then you could ensure them that you will never let them down, because that crop is their livelihood. When you can do that to scale and deliver, then you'll get the adoption. And I don't know what the right rate of adoption will be, but Corigin has to be able to deliver that to the grower so there's no doubt that they can count on Corigin to deliver. And when that happens, you're going to get adoption really fast.
I got one thing to say. Does this work? Can you even hear me? Oh, whatever. I'll use this guy. Thank you, Charlie. My grandfather told me at a very young age he never met a rich farmer. And that's true. I believe that, and I'll back that up. But people who adopt, or rich dairymen actually, for that fact, but people who adopt it quick with things that change from a flat barn dairy. I don't know if any of you know what a dairy barn is, but flat barn dairy to a parallel, and added milk machines to milk quicker. They made money fast. To go from a hay and grain to a TMR ration. The same way I look at farming, there's not that many rich farmers with the price of ground and everything right now. Nothing's gonna set you apart. So when Matt brought this whole regenerative deal to me, and the more I studied into it, I believe this is what a lot of people are calling for. So I believe the first movers will be able to make profits on this. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at this from my personal point. And I just think that the quicker you move, the more you adapt. Not doing 40 acres, for me, it was, we farmed 4,000 to 5,000 acres of tomatoes, and we immediately did 2,000 acres of regenerative tomatoes this year, and they were by far our highest yielders. So it
That's my kind of adoption curve, Doug.
Huh?
That's my kind of adoption curve,
Yeah, well,
just saying.
shit, you go bigger on the home, like.
Any questions? Anyone else want to throw a question to the audience? Yeah, please go ahead.
Great launch so far. My biggest question is basically for Mike. I asked you this question earlier, but give us your big vision of the company and what you guys are trying to impact in the world.
Yeah, thanks for that. We really aim to build multiple replicate plants like what you see here all around the world. Our model has been that the supply chain is really efficient within about a 200-mile radius. That's roughly about a long-haul trucker's day of bringing product in and product distribution out. So we aim to basically, our process has been prove the product, prove the technology, prove the business model, prove you can scale, do it 20 times, 50 times, and do it all over the world with the right partners. So that's really our strategy, is to build many, many plants like this all around the world, whether or not it's with banana plantations in Central America, or pea protein waste going to alternative meat, for example, in the Midwest. Might be sugar bagasse or rice hulls or palm oil waste in Indonesia. The world of agriculture is replete with this agricultural waste stream. I mean, 80% of what is grown on a farmer's field is not their marketable crop. They're shells, twigs, hulls, that sort of stuff that has very little value, and yet that's loaded with biochemistry. And I think Christian and his team have cracked the code on how to access that, and I think we've cracked the code on how to make a business out of that. So that's our long-term vision.
How does the use of biochar impact surface water and groundwater?
How does it do us?
Impact surface water and groundwater?
Well, it's interesting. So with wastewaters, I got a call out of the blue from some people at LA County that want to use biochar to remediate organic contaminants in their wastewater. So biochar is incredibly porous, hence it holds an awful lot of water. But the surface chemistry also will facilitate the absorption of heavy metals, as an example. The Chinese have done a lot of research in this because they've destroyed their land with heavy metals. What's fascinating is about biochar is it will absorb the heavy metal and make it irreversibly bind, so it's no longer available for uptake for plants, as an example. On the organic side, there have been people who have taken fracking water or dairy effluents and on a single pass eliminated 80% of the phosphorus, 80% of the nitrogenous compounds on a single pass. So if you do that twice, that's 96%. So biochar is a sorbent, and it has, we think, incredible potential to clarify wastewaters, surface waters, drinking waters across the board. So it's an area that we're really excited about.
And I would just add to that regenerative agriculture, at the heart of it is healthier soils that are richer in biology. And really the net benefit there is it increases nutrient mobility and utilization. I mean, it's one of the things, a part of the pivot point that happened for me was realizing how laughably inefficient our fertilizers are, how wasted they are. UC Davis would tell you between 50 and 70% of the nitrogen we apply is lost to leaching, volatilization, and that's a negative environmental byproduct, right? So if we can create better nutrient efficiency to where we're eliminating that leaching or that volatilization, it's not just the biochar, but it's the Corigin solution, it's the regenerative approach that helps us accomplish that. So I think we can keep our drinking water clean and our waterways cleaner. California's got horrible nitrate problems. I think the latest one I read was 27% of our domestic wells test over the safe levels for nitrate in drinking water. And we all can guess where the majority of that nitrogen comes from. So amazing potential to help improve water quality.
So I'm always reading the science around this sort of stuff. I scour it all the time, and a paper just came out from some academics on how it is that these kinds of distillates reduce nitrogen volatilization, and it basically suppresses the soil enzymes called urease, which turn urea into ammonia, which can volatilize off, or nitrous oxide. In that paper, they got better rates on cabbage, which is a pretty nitrogen-intensive crop, by cutting fertilizer rates 33%, by essentially turning soil into a slow-release soil as opposed to a quick-release soil of nitrogen. So nitrogen is a bad thing when it comes from synthetic or sources or it's overused. It becomes a real problem.
Yeah, I kind of want to add, it's not only regenerative in a soil. For example, like we use the chlorophyll in our hydroponic system to not have to flush it every 2 weeks. Standard practice in a hydroponic system is flush it every 2 weeks because your fertilizer balance gets off. With the chlorophyll, we went to 10 months before we had to flush the whole system. And I mean, if you have a 6-acre farm with deep water lettuce growth, that is a hell of a ton of water that you have to flush, and it goes down the drain.
Did you say 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
To 10 months?
To 10 months. So there is a regenerative aspect, although it's not year, that we could prove in like a hydroponic system as well.
That's amazing.
A little bit about what you saw with fungal control and taste.
I have a question, and I'm going to this sounds great, the science is great. What is it going to cost me to be able to use this Corigin? And how often do we use it? I mean, the breakfast.
Yeah, how much does it actually cost? So on this orchard right here, that used 1.5 gallons of chlorophyll on roughly, I think it was 1 application, 2 applications. Full retail price, that's $60 worth of product to turn that crop around of the chlorophyll.
How much crop?
Oh, $60 per acre, and these were 10-acre blocks. Yeah, so it would have been, for that block, it would be 10 times $60, so pretty inexpensive.
Just another thought that I had. Charlie, you were talking about how sometimes it's difficult for farmers to make these changes, and we're sort of talking in a way about the carrot approach of providing better solutions that can help guide farmers and food systems in a new direction. Matt, you talk about some of issues with nitrogen and sort of environmental issues. One thing that we haven't really talked about that much is the ESG benefits, but also the regulatory environment that we're in as well. There's a burn ban, it's coming in California, I think it's 2025 that it's going to happen. And so, there's the carrot and the stick model here. And I'm sure, we tend to like the carrot a whole lot more than the stick. But I'm curious what you on the panel think about sort of the environment that we're, the regulatory sort of environment that we're in right now and where we're headed, and how much of a role do you think that that's going to play in a transition like this? Or can we just do it by doing better business, by providing better products that just happen to work better and, oh, by the way, are better for everyone in the planet?
So I'll give you maybe a 2-part answer. Regulatory tends to be viewed as compliance from my farmers. I don't have a choice. It's not what I choose to do, it's what I have to do to meet the minimum. I think for farmers to really get behind change, it has to be economically viable and make it easier for them to adopt it. That's when you get real change. It's not from regulations, it's from people that can affect change in their daily practices and make it work economically. Then they get behind it. Doesn't matter what the regulations say. But that's just, when I talk to my farmers over the years, organic standards included. When the law came out on organic in 2002, we wrote the standards at Earthbound with Congress. And I will tell you, all my farmers went, those are rules we got to follow. I go, that's correct. They don't like it. But when you can make them profit and show them how they can make better product, do it the right way, then you get adoption. It's not so much the regulatory side as it is making it work for the farmers.
Any other questions? Please.
Kind of going with that, Charlie, can you give some examples of, like, so we talked about the organics, the premiums that organic growers get, and then conventional growers, what kind of premiums might they be able to get by adopting practices like utilizing chlorophyll into their crop production inputs? And some ideas there for an almond grower or a tomato grower to really want to adopt these practices because of premiums they might be able to get.
It's a really good question. In the early days, there was organic to the right that was a premium price to the market. There was conventional to the left, and there was a system called, I'll date myself here a little bit, I think it's NutriClean back in the day, and it was something in between. And I would tell you the market would not pay for that in between. It was really interesting to watch. Either you were all in on organic or you were not organic. That was kind of the bifurcation that was occurring. What I think regenerative agriculture will do is I do think there will be some premiums that get paid for as it relates to an ESG component around food. And I think that's going to wind up coming driven by consumers on the pull side through the retail side. Because if you guys think about food, most people You guys are the anomaly because you're in the food industry. Most people go to the grocery store and buy their lettuce or buy their food or whatever. They don't know where it comes from. They don't know how it's produced. They just go buy it. That's the majority of how people get their food. More and more, thanks to the internet and Google, people are learning about all of this. And I do think consumers will start spending with their wallet for the regenerative agriculture because they see the impacts. It's not going to happen overnight. I've been at this since 1998. We do see consumer movements towards doing and purchasing with their wallet to support what's right for the regenerative agriculture. But it's going to take some time. Now, the one thing I will say, I have a lot of large conventional farms here and throughout California, as Mike knows. He's been introduced to most of them. A lot of them will use this product and still be conventional. And because it's going to help them. And it's going to help them on their internal side of cost and yield. And I do think they will start to develop their own marketing piece to the retailers and get paid for it. I really do. When I talk to Walmart or I talk to Whole Foods or Costco, all of which are our key accounts over my 16 years there, they all want to buy from companies that are checking the ESG box. And I think farmers that start checking that box sooner than later are going to get rewarded for that. And I do think there'll be a premium. It won't be as high as organic, but I do think there'll be a premium. But it's going to take time and education.
Serge, maybe you can talk a little bit about what the people at Brush Creek saw in the types of produce you began to produce.
Yeah, of course. My mic doesn't work. So what we saw, so when we did like one big carrot study, for example, carrots was like a big crop for the chefs at the time. It was kind of like a hit thing to put on a plate. So we developed that we could grow with 4 different amendments, and one amendment being chlorophyll. Each had a color label, and we went to the chefs. And I mean, these are 5 executive chefs, like really, really well-known chefs. And we put the buckets in front of them and taste it. I just want you to taste because we want like the best carrot to grow here in the greenhouse for the end consumers. And all of them picked chlorophyll. All of them, and it was not the highest yielding amendment, but definitely the highest yielding, like the biggest flavor. So yeah, we went with chlorophyll like overall, and the strawberries got better, and the peas got better, and the lettuce got better. It just had like a yield component of sugar. So Mike and I sent also carrot samples to a lab, not to just have like a chef say like it tastes better. It actually yielded 10% more sugar. It was actually 10% more sugar in the carrot, and that's where most of the flavor comes from, is from the sugars in the fruit. So, yeah, no, it was tremendous. That was like a benefit of getting extra yield. You actually getting better flavor.
Do you have any other questions? Well, I want to thank everybody and thank you to the panel.